Good afternoon, Og Prep students. Welcome to chapel. Today's topic is going to be split into a couple of different sessions just because it is so big and it is so important. And what this topic is, it is the Bible and mental health. A lot of you had questions about what does God think about mental health? Where is God when I'm going through a poor mental health time, when I'm experiencing anxiety, depression? Does the Bible say anything about mental health? Does it say anything about my well being? And I am going to answer those questions for you today and just have a discussion about this. Now, the term mental health or mental illness, like we would know it today, does not appear in Scripture. It's a very new term that has been developed within the past years in the psychology industries, but it does not appear in Scripture. However, that does not mean that God does not have to say anything about our minds and emotions and just our mental well being. This also does not mean that your emotions and your experiences are not valid. We care for you deeply, but even more importantly, God cares for you deeply. We see this in the scripture. He made you in his image. He loves you, he cares for you, and he wants all of his children and all of his creation to honor and glorify him. But the problem is that sin has been introduced into the world, and we'll go into that in a little bit. But I wanted to start this out by saying we were created with real emotions because we were made in the image of God. Emotions are not a bad thing. Whatever goes on in our mind, God has created our minds to do that. We have been created in the image of God. We have to understand that God has emotions as well. He gets angry at sin. He's sad when his children do not follow him. And he also rejoices in truth and redemption, as we see throughout Scripture. We also see that Jesus, God's Son, who is also God, experienced sadness, joyfulness, exhaustion, righteous anger when he came to earth and ministered. We can see this in the Bible through Mark 3:5, John 11:35, which is a really famous passage for just saying that Jesus wept, John 15:11, and Matthew 27:46. Now, we were created with emotions, but we were also created with free will. Therefore, we have choices when we are expressing our emotions. Unfortunately, we are sinful human beings and we often make the wrong choices when we are talking about our emotions and talking about our mental health state. And we also need to understand that emotions and what we put into our minds and bodies influence not only us, but they influence other people. So I'm going to be using emotion is kind of a term that can be replaced for mental health and mental illness within this, because that's just going to be a little easier when we're translating scripture and when we're talking about this. Okay, so here are some emotions that you could be feeling in your own life. And there are lots of reasons why you can be feeling these emotions, whether it's anxiety, fear, depression, anger, obsessive thoughts, perfectionism, any of those things. There are lots of different causes. Maybe you've had a deep traumatic experience. Maybe there's family problems. Maybe you have broken a friendship. Maybe you feel unsafe. You're in a not so great situation. Maybe there's an injustice happening. Maybe you're a part of an unhealthy lifestyle, so you just don't feel so great all the time. These are all potential causes. And this is not a limited list. There are way more causes that we can explore, but these are the ones we're just going to be kind of talking about. But there's something that we need to understand, and that is that emotions and causes are together, and that emotions do not happen to us. Emotions do not happen to us without cause. They don't just happen out of the blue. We also have to understand there are appropriate and inappropriate emotions. Say somebody in your family has passed away. It would be an appropriate emotion to be grieving, to be sad about that. It would be an inappropriate emotion, say if you got a bad grade on a test and you reacted in such anger that was so unrighteous. Or it might be an inappropriate emotion if you're experiencing such fear and anxiety and worry about something simple like what you're going to be wearing to school tomorrow. We choose what emotions to dwell on and to accept in our lives. We choose to feed or starve these emotions. Now, this is all because of sin. We often choose to dwell on the wrong emotions because of sin. We may hurt others, or others may hurt us with the wrong emotions because of sin. And you may experience hurtful emotions because of sin. The biggest cause, the biggest underlying cause of all emotions, of all mental health problems, is going to be sin. And that is not just because maybe you have sinned in your life, but it's because other people have sinned against you. Just because you have done something wrong, potentially wrong, does not mean that is the cause for you feeling anxiety or depression. That is not it at all. I'm not trying to say that. But we do have to understand that there is a cause and effect. And I like to use this image right here. It's called the root and fruit tree. So, what are you dwelling on? What is the roots of your tree? What should you want and believe? What are those things in your life that are under the surface that are causing your fruit? And how is that affecting your behavior as well? How is all of that tied in with the gospel? We're going to be going over more of this in our next session. And we're going to be really talking about that because the root and fruit tree is a great illustration to help us learn why we are experiencing emotions and if they are godly or biblical or unbiblical and ungodly. Unfortunately, emotions can become our gods, so we must observe the roots and the fruits. Today, we're kind of told that we should keep nothing back. We should never not control how we're feeling. It's always good to get all of those feelings out, no matter what they are, and be communicating about those things. A lot of resources also tell us that all of our emotions and all of our mental health problems are linked to chemicals happening in the brain, which to a degree is true. But there's a lot of things in the brain that we don't know about and we don't know. And a lot of people also say that all of these problems can't be fixed by God alone. You need something else to help you. And I am here to tell you that no matter how big your problem may be, it is never going to be too big for God. Even if it's something that's happening in your own mind, there's never going to be anything that is too big for God. And that doesn't mean you need to not seek out help. I think anybody who is experiencing any sort of mental health problems should seek out a counselor, seek out somebody that you trust to talk to and get help, especially when it is some sort of compromising situation or something that can be physically harming to you. We are also told that what we think is an illness that cannot be cured, it can only be coped with. There are a lot of resources, there's a lot of materials that provide a lot of coping mechanism, but they never provide true solutions. And again, one of the truest solutions is the Bible and Scripture. That does not mean that a Bible verse being said to you is going to fix everything in your life. No, it's not. That's going to take time. That's going to take time talking with counselors and pastors, people close in your life, and coming up with real and honest solutions. So, what can we do? I've gone over a lot of things. This is just kind of an overview. But what can you do when you are experiencing poor mental health or you are experiencing something that is awful and severe, some sort of circumstance in your life that you just are not sure how to handle? Well, the first and biggest thing that we need to do is train our feelings. And we see this over and over and over again in the scripture. God commands obedience from the heart. And in scripture, the heart is something that is referred to as like our soul, our conscience, what we think, what we feel. It's connected with the brain. That is the heart. And we need to be observing and obeying what is coming from our heart and lining that up with what God says in the Bible. The heart is deceitful, it's wicked. Again, we are sinful human beings. And the cure for that is looking at scripture and seeing how that lines up. Also, God tells us again what emotions are sinful and what are appropriate. We should delight and hope in the Lord even in bad circumstances. And I know that can be really tough. But again, God is who we are supposed to be going to for our hope and our salvation through everything, even when we don't understand it. Tying into that, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says we shouldn't lean on our own understandings and strength, but we should ultimately be leaning on God. Another thing is that we should never be anxious or worry about what is outside of our control. Again, we'll be going over this in another section, diving into anxiety and depression and what the scripture says about that as well. And our last one is we should never give into feelings of anger or revenge, according to Ephesians 4:26. So those are just some ways and some things that the scripture says about training our feelings, about observing what's in our hearts and seeing if that lines up with the Bible and that lines up with God, what God has said in his word. Beyond that, so these are just like practical tips that you can think about right now when you are thinking about your mental health. So first, you need to do a mind and body checkup. And this is checking in on what you're thinking about, what you're consuming, what you're putting into your body, and what you're putting into your mind. So make sure to breathe, take deep breaths, and whenever you're experiencing something, think about these questions. Have you eaten? Have you slept? Have you had water? What does your environment look like around you? Have you talked to somebody? Just really grounding yourself and thinking, why am I feeling this way? What are some causes to why I might be feeling this way? The scripture says over and over again that our bodies are temples and that we need to be taking care of them. There was a prophet who was feeling some really strong emotions, and God said to him, look, Elijah, you need to eat, you need to sleep, and then you need to rethink and evaluate what you're saying. And we'll go over that again in our next session. Another part of your mind and body checkup is, again, checking your mind. And you'll just ask yourself these questions. What are you feeling? And you'll have to put it in simple terms. So, are you mad? Are you sad? Are you worried? Are you angry? Put it in as simple as you can, and maybe you're feeling a lot of different things. But what are you feeling? Define those. And then why are you feeling that way? What are some reasons why you think you are experiencing this emotion? And beyond that, you need to be asking yourself, is it a godly emotion to be having right now? Again, those inappropriate and appropriate emotions and reactions. What am I doing to help myself emotionally? If you're super sad, it is not a good thing for you to continually be taking in sad things like sad music or movies or books. That's only going to increase your sadness. What are you doing to help your emotional state? Are you getting outside? Are you getting away from screens? We're also going to ask, what does the Bible say about that emotion? And then, most importantly, have you gone to God with it? Have you talked to God about why you're feeling this way or the problems that you're experiencing? Because that is going to be one of the most helpful things that you can do, is talking to God. This is just a really long quote. I'm not going to read all of it, but remember that God has given us emotions. He's a feeling God. But unfortunately, these emotions can become gods to us. What we have to remember is that God is loving and he loves us. And he wants us to hate what he hates. And he wants us to honor and glorify him in all that we do and say. And this is a verse, it is from Isaiah 26:3. It says, keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you, because he trusts in you. That's just about always putting our confidence in God and always going back to him when we are experiencing tough mental health times. Thank you guys so much for listening. I know that was super fast and there's a lot of information, but thank you so much. And